In this episode of Ideas, I talk with one of the kindest guys in the business, Bob Burg. We talk about his terrific book, The Go-Giver. We also talk about what it means to be influential, what it takes to be a great leader, the idea of push and pull, something I really liked, how to thrive in sales, and much more. All right, here we go. Today's guest is Bob Burg. He is a sought-after speaker and is the best-selling author of a number of books on sales, marketing, and influence, including his terrific book, The Go-Giver. Bob, thanks so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure, Adam. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And, I'm always fascinated by people's stories, seeing that you've written The Go-Giver and it's sold over 500,000 copies. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's getting near the 750,000 mark, but
Oh, wow.
until
Okay.
it gets to that, we're kind of not saying it. But we'll be letting that cat out of the bag as soon as it does. Believe me.
Sure. And then all your other books that are out, with that in there too, over 1 million copies sold. Am I correct in saying
Yeah.
that as well? Okay.
Uh-huh.
So I think it's really interesting for myself and listeners seeing that you've had success with writing. Let's go back to the beginning. Like, where did you start? How did you get to where you're at? And I think we'll find some value in that and maybe some key pieces that we might be able to apply to our own life. So if you would, share your story with us.
Well, I began as a broadcaster, first
Okay.
in radio, and then in very small market television. I was the late night news guy for a Midwestern U.S. Television ABC affiliate. Did that for a little bit. I wasn't very good at it. I could read the news. That wasn't an issue, but I certainly wasn't a journalist. I was 24 years old. I had no real knowledge of the news. And at that time, I really didn't care. It was just I wanted to be a broadcaster, and I really wanted to be a sportscaster who was in news because that's where I had gotten the job. But it wasn't really long before I realized that that was not going to be my life's work, and I began taking a job in sales just at that time to make ends meet. Remember, I was in small market TV; I was not making a lot of money,
Sure.
and so just to hold myself over, began in sales. But I found I enjoyed sales, although at first I was not very good at that because I had no training, I had no skill set, and hadn't learned. So I floundered for the first few months until I was in a bookstore. Now, this is almost 40 years ago now, back when bookstores were most known for selling books as
Yeah.
opposed to coffee and pastries and everything. And
Right.
I was in the business section, and there turned out to be a sales section, which surprised me because I didn't realize sales was a thing in terms of learning about it. I hadn't been taught that. But there were books by people like Tom Hopkins and Zig Ziglar, and I started studying their books, and really within just a few weeks, my sales began to dramatically improve.
Hmm.
And what's interesting to me about that is that the only difference between where I was before I read their books and studied them and 3 weeks later was having the knowledge, having a system, if you will. And to this day, I define a system as simply the process of predictably achieving a goal based on a logical and specific set of how to principles, the key being predictability. In other words, if it's been proven that by doing A, you'll get the desired results of B, then you know that all you need to do is A and do A continually, and you'll get the desired results of B. And so that was a breakthrough for me.
Yeah.
That was a real epiphany. And of course, Zig Ziglar and Tom Hopkins just had such outstanding materials. And so they were really my first teachers. And I began to really study sales. And of course, with sales, you're also studying personal development. So that's when I began to get books like Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, and Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, and The Magic of Thinking Big by David Schwartz, and all
Hmm.
the classics, As a Man Thinketh and Psycho-Cybernetics, and started doing it was an inside job first. You had to
Right.
really build
Yeah.
yourself, but that and learning the skills of sales just took it began really the success path, if you will. And eventually I began teaching others what was working for me after working my way up to sales manager, and then began a speaking business, a speaking career. And that's sort of how it happened.
What I heard there was that not only did you have the knowledge, but you created systems and put routines in place. And there's so many people that we come across, that I've come across, that have the knowledge but don't actually put action to it. Would you say that's the key, to set up routines and systems? Because having the knowledge, of course, isn't enough to produce results. Is that what you've seen in your own life?
Oh, sure. And this is one reason when we talk about, being a go-giver, we say we also want you to be a go-getter,
Yeah,
right? You need
right,
to take
right.
action. It's not enough to just have a great idea, great thought, or a wonderful intent. Those are fantastic, but those
Mm-hmm.
are a starting point. You've got to be willing to take action on these ideas. And I could have read Zig's books and listened to his, back then it was tapes, not even CDs. And the same with Hopkins, and the same with all the people. I could have read it and just say, hey, the great ideas. No,
Mm-hmm.
you've got to apply the information, and that is just such a. You bring up such a wonderful point, Adam. It's just such an important part is the application of it.
And so you just mentioned The Go Giver. Let's just jump into it because it was such a great book, and I think listeners would get a lot of value from it, would gain a lot from it. So, if you were to give us a quick snapshot, what would you say is the overall premise of the book?
Yeah, and it's a business parable, so it's a short
Hmm.
story. It was written with John David Mann, who's a magnificent storyteller and writer and entrepreneur. And so I'm kind of a how-to guy. I'm step one, step two. So I'm the systems guy, right?
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah. No,
but
that's great.
the the basic premise is simply that shifting your focus, and this is key, shifting your focus from getting to giving. And when we say giving in this context, we simply mean constantly and consistently providing value to others. And that doing so is not only a nice way, a pleasant way of conducting business, it happens to be the most financially profitable way of doing business as well.
Hmm. I love that. So, yeah, I mean, talking about business there, and you talk about the entrepreneurial spirit a lot in the book.
Mhm.
But what about those who aren't entrepreneurs? Most of my audience is, but
There, sure.
for those who aren't, does the message in it still apply to them?
Well, it does because we always have to go back to the premise. What is an entrepreneur? And that's a person who's bringing value to the marketplace, right?
Yeah.
Only instead of with the entrepreneur who has taken a risk, has invested their money and their money maybe as well as others, and they've got a product or service, something they're either selling, distributing, inventing, and then whatever. And that's so their customer, if you will, is not only their employees, but the people, the end users, of course, with a person who maybe works within a company. They may not consider themselves an entrepreneur, but they need to be an intrapreneur. They need to be an entrepreneur within another person's organization. Why? Well, it comes down to this, and I tell them when I speak to entrepreneurs, salespeople at conferences, I'll often begin by saying, nobody's going to buy from you because you have a quota to meet.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to buy from you because you need the money. They're not even going to buy from you because you're a really nice person who believes in your product or service. No, they're going to buy from you only because they believe they will be better off by doing so than by not doing so. And that's the only reason anybody should buy from you. Well, when you are an intrapreneur, in other words, an employee in someone else's business, no one's going to hire you or keep you because you need the money. They're not going to hire you or keep you because you have a mortgage to pay or because you're building for your kids' college education. They're going to hire you or keep you on because they believe it's in their best interest to do so. They believe they're getting value that they can utilize to meet their goals, and that you are a good conduit to that happening. And so so your customers are who? Your customers are your fellow coworkers, your supervisor if you have one, your team members if you're leading someone, your boss, the owner of the company, and of course the end users, whether directly or indirectly. So sure, you're always looking for ways to bring value to your marketplace, whether you're an entrepreneur or an entrepreneur.
I love that message, making it all about other people rather than ourselves. And that's what the book is all about. I thought a really interesting quote from the book was where you wrote, "Does it make money is not a bad question. It's a great question. It's just a bad first question." I really like that. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, especially startups, might disagree with you on that. So
Mhm.
let's dive into that. What do you mean by that statement?
Sure. Well, and again, will it make money is a great question.
Yeah,
You've got to ask that question. It's
right.
just a bad first question. Why? Because again, no one is going to invest in you, or no one's going to buy from you once it's out there because you want them to,
Yeah,
right? They're
right.
going to do it because they believe there's value in doing so. So the first question you need to ask is, will it serve this product or service I'm coming up with? Is there a market for it?
Hmm.
Is it going to bring value to the marketplace? And if so, will I be able to communicate that value? Maybe there's great value in it, but you don't see that there are people who will actually buy it. Okay. So you've got to first begin with the customer, the potential customer, which might be your investor or the eventual customer. First, you've got to ask, will it serve? Is there a marketplace? Now, if the answer is yes, whether there is one or you can create one or what have you, that's the risk an entrepreneur takes sometimes. But now the next question is, will it make money? Because
Okay.
again, you could have
Yeah.
a wonderful product or service and you can have a marketplace that absolutely loves it and just eats it up. But if you're not making money from it, well, now you've just got a very expensive hobby.
Yeah.
And there's
Right.
nothing wrong with hobbies. We recommend them, but that's not what we're talking about here. And so,
Yeah. Right.
uh,
That's a good point.
so no, both questions. It's not an either
Okay.
or. So if people, sometimes people will hear the first part of it and say, think, oh, Berg's saying it's not important. No, it's a very important question. But if you lead with money, it's not going to work. It's not going to happen because again, that's not why the other person is going to buy because you want the money.
That's a really good point, driving it home there. I also found the 5 laws that you share in the book really interesting, and I think that could be valuable for listeners as well. So, if you would, just give a quick review of what those 5 laws are.
Sure. The laws themselves are the laws of value, compensation, influence, authenticity, and receptivity. The law of value, and they work together holistically. So it's utilizing all 5 of them. If you leave out any one, it's sort of not going to have the effectiveness that it could if you utilize all of them. But all of them together are very powerful. So law of value, which says your true worth in the business sense, is determined by how much more you give in value than you take in payment, which again, right off the cuff sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? Give more in value than you take in payment. We simply have to understand the difference between price and value. Price is a dollar figure, it's a dollar amount, it's finite, it is what it is. Value, on the other hand, is the relative worth or desirability of a thing to the end user or beholder. In other words, what is it about this thing, this product, service, concept, idea that brings so much worth to someone that they will willingly exchange their money for it and be glad they did while you make a very, very healthy profit? Can I give you just a quick example on this one?
Yeah, please do.
Let's
Yeah.
say one of your entrepreneurs listening to this is an accountant, okay?
Hmm.
And they have a client, they charge, we're just going to name a round figure, $1,000. That's their fee or literally their price. But what kind of value do they need to provide to this person? Well, first of all, through their years of learning and studying and understanding accounting practices, but also through getting to know this potential customer, learning about their business, about their wants, their needs, their desires, the way you handle and treat this customer, everyone on your team. You're able to save this person $5,000 on their taxes. You also save them countless hours, freeing them up to doing the things that they value, that they are better at doing. You also provide them with the peace of mind and the security of knowing it was done correctly. So again, we see here, Adam, that while price is finite, value can be both concrete in terms of that $5,000 that you've saved them, but it can also be conceptual in terms of that peace of mind, which probably holds more value to that person than even the money saved. So
Yeah.
you gave them well over $5,000 in value or use value in exchange for $1,000 price or cash value. So they feel absolutely great about you while you still made a very healthy profit because that $1,000 is well worth it to you to do their taxes. So,
That's a really good
yeah,
example. Yeah. And one of the 5 laws you mentioned, I wanted to spend just a little more time on the topic of influence
sure.
because around the leadership conversation,
Hmm.
it is such a big topic.
Yeah.
So, with the message of being a go giver, how can a go giver make sure that they are influencing others through their life and their work? Because influence for years has been said as the root of leadership. I don't know if you would agree with that. You can tell us your definition of leadership if you'd like, but
Hmm.
how do we influence? Is giving influence? Spend some time on that if you would.
Yeah, well, I agree. Leadership is influence. John
Okay.
Maxwell
Yeah,
is best known
exactly.
for saying leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less, right? So let's define influence. Influence can be defined on a very, very basic level. Influence can be defined as simply the ability to move a person or persons to a desired action, usually within the context of a specific goal, right?
Hmm.
That's the definition, but I don't believe that that's the substance or the essence of influence. The essence of influence is pull, pull as
Mm,
opposed to push. And I
that's really
love to
good.
ask
Yeah, yeah.
leaders, how far can you push
Hmm.
a rope? And the answer is not very far, at least not very fast or very effectively, right? Which is why great influencers don't push. You very rarely hear someone say, "Wow, that Mary or that Dave, he is so influential. He has a lot of push." Right? Oh, he's just so pushy. We'll follow him anywhere. Right? No, you say very influential. She has a lot of pull because that's what influence is. Influence really, Adam, is an attraction. Great influencers attract people to themselves and to their ideas. And they do this again, not through pushing themselves, pushing their ideas, pushing their will on others, not through being pushy, but through its opposite, pull. And this pull we're speaking about is a very legitimate form of power, power being the exact opposite of force or compliance, which we know does not work very well. And it's not sustainable when it comes to leadership or influence. So I think that great influencers, they understand whether they've been taught this or they just intuitively understood. I think great influencers embrace what I believe was Dale Carnegie's underlying premise in his classic How to Win Friends and Influence People. And that's where he wrote, ultimately, people do things for their reasons, not our reasons. So the great influencer continually questions themselves, questions their own motives. How does what I'm asking this person to do, how does it align with their goals, with their needs, their wants, their desires? How does what I want this other person to do, how does it align with their values? And when we ask ourselves these questions thoughtfully, intelligently, genuinely, authentically, not as a way to manipulate another person into doing our will, but as a way of building everyone in the process, now we've come a lot closer to earning that person's commitment as opposed to their compliance.
I love that. The difference between push and pull. I think you've given us a lot to think about today, including that tidbit there. So thank
Thank you.
you.
My pleasure.
Kind of wrapping up here, then, this could be something that we've already talked about today, or it could be a different idea. But if there's one last piece of advice that you'd like to leave us with today, Bob, what would that be?
Well, I think it ties into what we've discussed, but I think that in and of itself, it's just a great lesson that we can all take. And this is a lesson I was given by a person probably 36, 37 years ago that made a huge difference in my life. And I think you'll probably see its tie-in with the Go Giver, and that's when I had been in sales for a couple of years. I had been doing well, but I also was kind of at a point where I was stuck. I was not really growing. I was sort of like Joe, the protagonist in the Go Giver, where I had a lot of potential, but it was not really expressing itself in the kind of results that it could. And when I came back to the office one day, and I guess I had a look of discouragement on my face because I did not have a sale. And one of the people there, who was an older guy who was just about to retire, he was not even in the sales department. I think he was in engineering or something, but one of those wise older guys. And he said to me, Berg, can I give you some advice? And I said, yeah, sure, please. And he said, if you want to make a lot of money in business, actually, he said, if you want to make a lot of money in sales, he said, don't have making money as your target. Your target, he said, is serving others. Now, when you hit the target, he continued, you'll get a reward, and that reward will come in the form of money. And you can do with that money whatever you choose. But never forget, the money is simply the reward for hitting the target. It's not the target itself. Your target is serving others, in this case, your customers. So I think if we keep that in mind, that goes right back to, is money important? Sure it is. Is it the focus? No. If it is the focus, you're not going to do as well. Because let's face it, Adam, our customers can tell if our focus is on them and bringing value to them, or if it's a transfer of money from their pocket to ours. And there's a huge difference in the way we come across. And this is why John David Mann, my co-author, and I, we often say that money is simply an echo of value. Money is an echo of value. It's the thunder, if you will, to value's lightning, which means the value must be the focus, which means you're focused absolutely, unabridgedly, laser on them and what they need, what they want, what they desire. When you do that, the money comes to you, and now you just need to, Law 5, be able to receive it and receive it well.
Very true and great advice. Thank you for that as well, Bob. Last question for you. Where would you like to send people to find out more about you and your work?
They can visit The Go-Giver without the hyphen, thegogiver.com. And while they're there, they can check out any of the Go-Giver books and some of the others. They can get chapters 1 and 2 of some of them. We have a new book, The Go-Giver Influencer, out April 10th. And they're welcome to get a chapter or 2 of that as well and see if they like it. But thank you so much for having me on your program, Adam. You've been great. You're a fantastic host, and I love the work you're doing.
Thank you so much, and thank you for taking the time.
My pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in. I hope you got something out of these ideas. Go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss an episode.